Get out of my seat. The voice was ice-wrapped in silk. Cold. Entitled. Dangerous. Dorcas looked up from her book. The woman standing over her wore a white Chanel suit that probably cost more than most people's cars. Her blonde hair was pulled back, so tight it looked painful. Diamond earrings caught the cabin light like tiny chandeliers. And her eyes, blue, sharp, furious, were drilling into Dorcas like she was something scraped off the bottom of an expensive shoe. "I'm sorry," Dorcas said quietly. "Don't play stupid with me." The woman's voice rose just enough to make the flight attendant near the galley turn her head. "That is seat 1A. I specifically requested seat 1A. And I am not about to spend 6 hours to Paris sitting anywhere else because you can't follow simple instructions." Dorcas closed her book slowly. She was wearing jeans, a gray hoodie, white sneakers that had seen better days. She looked normal, and on a private charter jet like this one, where every passenger paid 5 figures just to board, normal didn't belong. At least, that's what the woman in white seemed to think. "I'm in the right seat," Dorcas said calmly. "I booked 1A. The woman's laugh was sharp and ugly. "You booked 1A. She said it like it was the funniest joke she'd heard all year. "Sweetie, I don't know what budget booking site you stumbled onto, but this is Vanguard Executive. We don't do mix-ups." She leaned down, close enough that Dorcas could smell her perfume, something expensive and suffocating. "So here's what's going to happen. You're going to get up. You're going to move to whatever seat you were actually assigned. And you're going to do it without making a scene. Because trust me, you do not want to embarrass yourself on a plane full of people who matter." Dorcas didn't move. She just looked at the woman, really looked at her. And in that moment, she made a decision. Not to fight, not to argue, not yet. Because sometimes, the best response to cruelty is patience. Sometimes, you let people dig their own graves. Before we get into what happened next, make sure you're subscribed. Drop a comment telling us where you're watching from. Because what happens in the next few minutes is going to make you question everything you think you know about power, privilege, and who really owns the room. This story starts 6 hours earlier. New York, Teterboro Airport, private terminal. Dorcas sat in the executive lounge, sipping terrible coffee and going through emails on her phone. She looked exactly like she did now. Jeans, hoodie, sneakers. No designer bags. No jewelry. No armor. Just herself. Most people who saw her assumed she worked there. A secretary, maybe. Or someone's assistant tagging along on a business trip. They never guessed the truth. Dr. Dorcas Glenn owned the plane. Not a seat on the plane. The entire damn aircraft. She'd bought Vanguard Executive 6 months ago. Paid cash. $240 million for a fleet of luxury jets, a private terminal lease, and a client list that read like a Forbes Top 100 directory. She was 34 years old. A black woman. An aerospace engineer who'd made her fortune designing next-generation fuel systems that every major airline now licensed. She had 16 patents, 3 degrees, and more money than she knew what to do with. But she didn't look like wealth. She didn't wear it like a costume. And that, more than anything else, made people underestimate her, which was exactly how she liked it. When you look like money, people perform for you. When you don't, they show you who they really are. And Dorcas had spent the last 6 months watching how her crew treated passengers they thought were important versus the ones they didn't. Watching which clients tipped, which ones snapped their fingers at flight attendants like they were servants, which ones said please and thank you. She'd fired 3 pilots, 2 operations managers, and 1 concierge who made a joke about a passenger's wait when he thought no one was listening. She was cleaning house, and today's flight was supposed to be routine. A quick trip to Paris, reposition the aircraft, maybe sit in on a meeting with a potential investor who wanted to add 2 more jets to the fleet. She'd booked herself under the name Miss Glenn. No title, no fanfare, just another passenger. Seat 1A, the best seat on the plane. The one she'd specifically designed when she had the cabin refit last year. Wider, softer leather, better legroom, a view that made you feel like you were flying the plane yourself. She paid for it. She owned it. And now, someone was trying to take it from her. The woman in white was named Caroline Whitmore. Dorcas knew that because she'd seen the passenger manifest that morning. Caroline Whitmore, age 46, platinum-level member, estimated net worth, $90 million, inherited wealth, luxury real estate, a reputation for donating to museums and sitting on charity boards that did more photo ops than actual charity. She flew Vanguard Executive twice a month. always first class, always seat 1A, and always difficult. Dorcas had read the notes, complained about the temperature 17 times on one flight, demanded the flight attendant be replaced mid-flight because she didn't like her tone, refused to sit next to another passenger once because he was wearing cologne she found offensive. The crew called her the Ice Queen behind her back, not because she was cold, but because she made everyone around her feel frozen, trapped, like one wrong word would shatter everything. And now, she was standing over Dorcas, vibrating with fury because someone had dared sit in her seat. "I'm not moving," Dorcas said quietly. Caroline blinked, like she'd just been slapped. "Excuse me. I said I'm not moving. I booked this seat. I'm staying in this seat." Caroline's face went from pale to pink to a deep, furious red. She turned sharply. Melinda, the flight attendant, a young woman with kind eyes and a nervous smile, hurried over. "Yes, Ms. Whitmore. This woman is in my seat." Melinda glanced at Dorcas, then at Caroline, then at the tablet in her hand. Let me just check the manifest." "I don't care about the manifest," Caroline snapped. "I requested seat 1A. I always sit in 1A. And I'm not about to be displaced by someone who clearly doesn't understand how this works." Melinda's smile tightened. "Of course, Ms. Whitmore. Let me just—" "Now, Melinda. I want this handled now." Melinda looked at Dorcas, and Dorcas saw it. The apology in her eyes. The fear. The knowledge that no matter what the manifest said, the passenger who screamed loudest usually won. "Miss." Melinda hesitated. "I'm so sorry, but would you mind?" "She's not moving me," Dorcas said, her voice calm but firm. "Check the manifest. I'm Dr. Dorcas Glenn. Seat 1A. I booked it 3 days ago." Melinda's fingers flew across the tablet. Her face went pale. Oh my God. "I'm so sorry, Dr. Glenn. I didn't realize." "Didn't realize what?" Caroline's voice was a whip crack. Melinda froze. She looked at Dorcas, then at Caroline. And in that moment, Dorcas saw her make a choice. The wrong one. "Dr. Glenn," Melinda said softly, apologetically, "would you mind terribly if we moved you to seat 3A? It's still a wonderful seat, and—" "No." The word hung in the air like a grenade. Caroline's smile was sharp and satisfied. "There. You see? Problem solved." She moved to sit down. Dorcas didn't budge. "I said no." Caroline stopped, turned, and for the first time, something ugly flickered across her face. "Listen to me very carefully," she said, her voice dropping to a hiss. "I don't know who you think you are. I don't know what discount website you use to scrape together enough money to pretend you belong here. But you don't. You don't belong in this seat. You don't belong on this plane. And if you don't move right now, I will make sure you regret it." Silence. The cabin felt like it was holding its breath. Dorcas stood up, slowly. She was tall, taller than Caroline, and when she rose to her full height, the other woman actually took a step back. "You want this seat that badly?" Dorcas said quietly. "Yes." "Fine." Caroline's face lit up with triumph. "Take it." Dorcas picked up her bag, walked past Caroline without another word, and sat down in seat 3A, right next to the lavatory, where the engine noise was louder, where the legroom was half what it was in 1A, where she could smell the faint chemical tang of the bathroom every time someone opened the door. Caroline settled into 1A like a queen reclaiming her throne. She didn't say thank you. She didn't even look at Dorcas. She just pulled out her phone, opened a bottle of champagne that Melinda brought without being asked, and smiled. Melinda approached Dorcas a few minutes later. "I'm so sorry," she whispered. "I know that wasn't fair. It's just, Ms. Whitmore is a platinum member, and she's very particular. And if I'd pushed back, she would have complained, and—" "It's fine," Dorcas said. "It's not. But thank you for understanding." Melinda walked away, and Dorcas sat there, in seat 3A, watching Caroline laugh into her phone. She didn't look angry. She didn't look hurt. She looked patient, because she knew something Caroline didn't. This flight wasn't over. Not by a long shot. And sometimes, the best revenge isn't loud. It's inevitable. The flight took off 20 minutes later. Smooth. Professional. Perfect. Dorcas sat in her cramped seat and worked on her laptop. Caroline sat in 1A and held court. She FaceTimed someone, loud enough for half the cabin to hear, about a charity gala she was hosting. "Darling, the flowers have to be white. Only white. If they send anything else, I'm canceling the entire event. I don't care if it's too late. Do you know how much I'm paying for this?" She ordered 3 glasses of champagne in the first hour, complained that the second one was too warm, sent back her lunch because the salmon was overcooked. And when Melinda apologized, again, Caroline waved her off like she was swatting a fly. "Just bring me something edible," she said. "Is that really so hard?" Melinda's smile never faltered. But Dorcas saw her hands shake as she walked back to the galley. 2 hours into the flight, Caroline got up to use the lavatory. She walked past Dorcas without a glance. But when she came back, she paused, looked down, and smiled. "You know," she said, loud enough for the people around them to hear, "I always think it's so sweet when people stretch to fly private. Like, good for you. Really, it must have taken a lot of saving." She said saving the way someone might say begging. Dorcas didn't look up from her laptop. "I'm sure it feels very glamorous," Caroline continued, "flying with people like us. But just so you know, for next time, there's a dress code. It's not written down, obviously, but there's an expectation, a standard." She gestured vaguely at Dorcas's hoodie. "This isn't a Greyhound bus, sweetheart." Dorcas closed her laptop, looked up, and smiled. It wasn't a friendly smile. "You're right," she said. "It's not." Caroline's eyes narrowed. But before she could respond, the cockpit door opened. The captain stepped out. Tall, mid-50s, graying hair. The kind of man who looked like he'd been flying planes since before Dorcas was born. His name was Michael Jordan. Not the basketball player. Just a guy whose parents had a terrible sense of timing. He'd been flying for Vanguard for 12 years. And Dorcas had been watching him closely. "Ladies and gentlemen," he said, his voice smooth and authoritative, "we've got some light chop ahead. Nothing serious, but I'm going to ask everyone to return to their seats and fasten their seatbelts." Caroline rolled her eyes. "Turbulence. Of course." She walked back to 1A. Michael's eyes flicked to Dorcas. Just for a second. And in that second, she saw something. Recognition. He knew who she was. He gave her the smallest nod and walked back into the cockpit. Dorcas smiled, because the plan was working. 30 minutes later, the turbulence started. Not bad. Just enough to rattle the cabin. Make the champagne glasses clink. Make Caroline grip her armrests and glare at the ceiling like the weather was personally offending her. And then, the intercom crackled. "Ms. Whitmore, could you please come to the cockpit?" Caroline froze. So did everyone else. It was unusual. Passengers didn't get called to the cockpit. Not unless something was very wrong. Or very right. Caroline stood, smoothed her suit, and walked forward, her heels clicking on the cabin floor. She disappeared behind the cockpit door. And 30 seconds later, everyone heard her scream. The scream wasn't loud, but it was sharp enough to cut through the hum of the engines. Sharp enough to make every passenger in the cabin sit up straighter. Melinda dropped the water bottle she was holding. Dorcas didn't move. She just waited, because she knew exactly what was happening behind that cockpit door. And it was going to be beautiful. The door opened. Caroline stumbled out. Her face was white. Not pale. White. Like someone had drained all the blood from her body and replaced it with ice water. Her hands were shaking. Her perfect blonde hair, pulled back so tight it looked like it hurt, was starting to come loose. And her eyes. God, her eyes. They locked onto Dorcas like heat-seeking missiles. "You," Caroline whispered. The cabin went silent. Every passenger turned to look. Melinda froze halfway down the aisle. Even the engines seemed to quiet, like the plane itself was holding its breath. Caroline walked toward Dorcas. Slowly, her heels clicking on the floor like a countdown. "You," she said again, louder this time. "You're Dr. Glenn." Dorcas looked up from her laptop. "I am. You own this company." "I do." Caroline's mouth opened. Closed. Opened again. Like a fish drowning in air. You let me." "Let you what?" Dorcas's voice was calm. "Steady." "Take my seat?" "Yes." "I did." "Why?" Dorcas closed her laptop. Leaned back in seat 3A, the cramped, uncomfortable, too close to the bathroom seat that Caroline had forced her into. And smiled. "Because I wanted to see what you'd do," she said. "I wanted to see if you'd apologize. If you'd realize your mistake. If you'd show even a shred of decency." She paused. "You didn't." Caroline's face went from white to red in under 2 seconds. "This is insane. You can't. This is entrapment or something. You set me up." "I didn't set you up," Dorcas said quietly. "You set yourself up. All I did was give you the space to show everyone exactly who you are." Caroline's hands clenched into fists. "You have no idea who you're messing with. Do you know who I am? Do you know what I can do to your little company? Your little company? Dorcas stood up. Slowly. This company is worth $250 million. And you? You're a passenger. A paying customer. That's it. She stepped closer. And as of right now, you're banned. The cabin erupted. Not in sound, but in energy. Passengers leaned forward in their seats. Melinda's hand flew to her mouth. Caroline looked like she'd been slapped. Banned. Permanently, Dorcas said. You're off this plane. You're off every plane in this fleet. And the second we land in Paris, you're going to walk off this aircraft and never come back. You can't do that. I own the company. I can do whatever I want. Caroline's voice rose to a shriek. This is discrimination. I'll sue you. I'll destroy you. Dorcas didn't flinch. Discrimination? She said softly. You threw a paying passenger out of her seat because you didn't like the way she looked. You humiliated her in front of an entire cabin. You treated my flight attendant like garbage. And now you're threatening to sue me because I won't let you keep doing it. She shook her head. Good luck with that. Caroline opened her mouth, closed it, opened it again, and then something inside her snapped. You think you're so special, she hissed. You think because you have money now, you belong here. But you don't. People like you never do. You'll always be the help. You'll always be the one people look past. And no amount of money is going to change that. The cabin went so quiet you could hear a pin drop. Dorcas stared at her, and for the first time, her calm cracked. Not into anger, into something colder. People like me, she said softly. Caroline didn't answer. You mean black people? Caroline's face flushed. I didn't. Yes, you did. Dorcas took a step forward. Caroline took a step back. You looked at me and saw someone who didn't belong. Not because of what I was wearing, not because of how I acted, but because of what I look like. And you decided, right there, in that moment, that I was beneath you. Her voice was steady, cold as steel. So let me tell you something about people like me. We built the planes you fly on. We designed the systems that keep you safe. We run the companies you take for granted. And we don't need your approval. We don't need your permission. And we sure as hell don't need your seat. She stepped back. Now sit down. And don't say another word for the rest of this flight. Caroline stood there, trembling. And then, slowly, she turned, walked back to seat 1A, and sat down. She didn't say another word. Not when Melinda brought her water. Not when the turbulence smoothed out. Not when the captain announced they were beginning their descent into Paris. She just sat there, staring at nothing, while Dorcas returned to seat 3A, opened her laptop, and went back to work. Like nothing had happened. The plane landed at Charles de Gaulle 40 minutes later. Smooth. Perfect. Professional. As the engines powered down and the seatbelt sign turned off, Dorcas stood. She grabbed her bag and walked toward the front of the cabin. Caroline didn't look at her. Melinda did. And when their eyes met, the flight attendant mouthed 2 words. Thank you. Dorcas nodded and stepped off the plane. Behind her, Caroline sat frozen in seat 1A. The seat she'd fought so hard for. The seat she'd humiliated someone to claim. And now, it was the last seat she'd ever sit in on a Vanguard executive jet. 3 days later, Dorcas sat in her office in New York. Floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the city. Minimalist furniture. A single framed photo on her desk. Her and her late mother, standing in front of the first plane Dorcas ever designed. Her assistant knocked. Miss Glenn? You have a visitor. Dorcas looked up. Who? She says her name is Melinda. From the Paris flight. Dorcas smiled. Send her in. Melinda walked in slowly, nervously, clutching her purse like a life preserver. Dr. Glenn, I'm so sorry to just show up like this, but Sit. Dorcas said gently. Melinda sat. I wanted to thank you, she said, for what you did, for standing up to her. I've been flying for 6 years, and I've never, no one's ever. Her voice broke. Dorcas handed her a tissue. You don't have to thank me, she said. You shouldn't have been put in that position in the first place. I know, but that's how it works, right? The customer is always right, even when they're wrong. Dorcas leaned back in her chair. Not anymore. Melinda looked up. What do you mean? I'm changing the policy. Effective immediately, no passenger, no matter how much money they have, gets to treat my crew like that. If they're abusive, they're gone. No warnings. No second chances. Melinda's eyes filled with tears. You're serious. Dead serious. That's going to cost you customers. Dorcas smiled. Good. I don't want customers who think money gives them the right to be cruel. Melinda laughed. A real laugh. the kind that comes from relief. "Can I ask you something?" she said. "Of course. Why didn't you just tell her who you were from the start? Why let her treat you like that?" Dorcas thought about it. "Because," she said slowly, "if I'd told her who I was, she would have apologized. Not because she was sorry, but because I had power, and I wanted to see who she was when she thought I didn't." She paused. "People show you their true selves when they think you can't do anything about it." Melinda nodded. "And now she knows exactly what happens when you underestimate the wrong person." They sat in silence for a moment. Then Melinda stood. "Thank you, Dr. Glenn. Really. Call me Dorcas." Melinda smiled and left. Dorcas turned back to her desk, back to her work, back to building something better. Because Caroline Whitmore was gone. But there would always be more like her. People who thought their money made them untouchable. People who thought cruelty was just part of the game. And Dorcas was going to spend the rest of her career proving them wrong. One flight at a time. 6 months later, Dorcas stood at the front of a conference room in London. 50 people sat in front of her. Pilots, flight attendants, operations staff, ground crew, every single person who worked for Vanguard Executive. She'd called this meeting 3 weeks ago. Mandatory attendance. No exceptions. And now, they were all here. Waiting. 6 months ago, Dorcas began, "I bought this company. And I did it for one reason." She paused. "I wanted to build something different. Something better. A company where people, passengers and crew, are treated with dignity. Where money doesn't buy you the right to be cruel. Where respect isn't optional." She clicked a button on the remote in her hand. The screen behind her lit up. A graph. Customer satisfaction scores. Before her ownership, 72%. After, 91%. "These are our numbers," she said. "Since we implemented the new policies, zero tolerance for abuse, mandatory respect training, crew empowerment to remove disruptive passengers, our satisfaction scores have gone up. Way up." She clicked again. Revenue projections. Up 34%. And so has our revenue. Because it turns out, when you treat people well, they come back. They tell their friends. They write reviews. They book more flights. She clicked again. A list of names. "These are the passengers we've banned in the last 6 months. 37 people. Some of them were platinum members. Some of them spent 6 figures a year with us." She looked around the room. "And we're better off without them." The room was silent. Then, slowly, someone started clapping. Melinda. And then someone else. And then the whole room erupted in applause. Dorcas smiled. "Thank you," she said. "But we're not done. This is just the beginning." She clicked one more time. A new logo appeared on the screen. Not Vanguard Executive. Something new. Elevation Airways. "We're rebranding," Dorcas said. "New name. New mission. Same values." She looked around the room. "We're not just flying people from point A to point B. We're showing them that luxury doesn't have to come with cruelty. That service doesn't mean servitude. That respect isn't a perk, it's the baseline." The applause came again. Louder this time. And as Dorcas stood there, looking at the faces of people who believed in what she was building, she thought about Caroline Whitmore. About the woman who'd tried to humiliate her. Who'd looked at her and seen nothing. And she smiled. Because Caroline was wrong. People like Dorcas didn't just belong. They built the places where everyone else wanted to be. 3 years later, Dorcas sat in Seat 1A on a brand new Bombardier Global 8000, the flagship of the Elevation Airways fleet. She was flying to Tokyo, a meeting with a potential partner who wanted to expand into Asia. The cabin was full, 12 passengers, all of them polite, all of them respectful, because that's who Elevation Airways attracted now. People who understood that luxury wasn't about exclusion. It was about elevation. For everyone. Halfway through the flight, a young woman approached her. She was nervous, clutching a worn notebook. "Excuse me," she said. "Are you Dr. Glenn?" Dorcas smiled. "I am. I wanted to say thank you. I read about what you did, about how you started this company, and it inspired me to apply to flight school." She held up the notebook. "I'm training to be a pilot, and I want to work for you someday." Dorcas looked at her, really looked at her, and she saw herself. 10 years ago, 20 years ago, a girl who didn't fit, who didn't look like the people in charge, who had to fight twice as hard to be seen. "What's your name?" Dorcas asked. "Tracy." "Tracy, I'm going to tell you something, and I want you to remember it." Tracy nodded. "You belong here. Not because someone gave you permission, not because you earned their approval, but because you decided you belong. And no one, No one gets to take that away from you. Tracy's eyes filled with tears. Thank you. Don't thank me, Dorcas said. Just promise me something. Anything. When you're the one in charge someday. And you will be. Remember this moment. Remember what it felt like to fight for your seat. And make sure no one else has to fight that hard. Tracy nodded. I promise. She walked back to her seat. And Dorcas turned back to the window, watching the clouds roll by, thinking about the journey, the fight. The moment she stood up in that cramped seat next to the lavatory and decided she wasn't going to be quiet anymore. And she smiled, because she'd won. Not just the seat, not just the company, but something bigger. The right to exist in spaces that were never built for her. The right to demand respect. The right to build something new. And no one, no Caroline Whitmore, no entitled passenger, no system designed to keep her out, was ever going to take that away. The video ends with a simple message on the screen. Your seat isn't just a place. It's a statement. Don't let anyone take it from you. And then, what would you have done in Dorcas's position? Drop a comment and subscribe for more stories about people who refuse to move.